I want to talk to you about energy conservation because it is the hot topic at the moment. The government are looking at something called the Warm Homes Plan, where they intend to upgrade a lot of our housing stock, especially around the rented area, improving the insulation, fitting double glazing, heat pumps, all those kind of things. Well, it's all very laudable, isn't it? And I think everybody wants to do their bit, not only maybe to save the planet, but also to lower their fuel bills. So we have to look at these proposals and see how much of them are doable and whether they make sense for our particular house. Now, when we look at this particular street, these are lovely old Victorian houses, this one no exception, good solid built houses. They've been there for over 100 years and they're probably going to do 200 years more without any trouble at all. But there are things that can be done to improve the energy performance of this. At the moment, the energy performance certificate for this house is a band D, which is not very good at all, and the government is proposing that with the Warm Homes Plan they get these properties down to a band C, which is better, band A being the best. They're looking at rented properties in particular, but for a private householder like this, what can they do to improve their energy without spending an absolute fortune? It's got to be realistic, but should they be putting in a heat pump? Should they be spending the money on insulation? But just before we go in and have a look in closer detail, let's have a quick look at the outside with my thermal imaging camera, because these cameras now, they're getting cheaper and cheaper. Even the homeowner can afford to buy one now. You can get one that plugs in the bottom of your phone. But this one, it's a slightly more sophisticated one, but it will give us a picture of the outside of the house and show us the obvious places where it's leaking heat. Now, being a solid wall rather than a cavity wall, we would expect it to be a lot colder than a cavity wall insulated house. So you can see that this house is glowing red right up to the top, and that means that everything there is leaking heat. Now when we come to the windows, they're slightly better, but there's still a fair amount of heat loss from those windows. Let's have a look at a new house, just as a comparison. This one being not too old, I wouldn't say that is any better particularly. I think they've insulated the loft, I think that's good, but the rest of the house looks pretty warm, which means it's leaking heat. So it's clear from this that the major heat loss now is on the walls, being solid walls. Now, in some houses you might fit external wall insulation, but you can see that there's very little scope for improving the wall insulation externally on this particular house. And because it's a lovely looking house, it'd be a great shame to spoil it. So we've seen the heat loss on the outside. Let's go and have a look on the inside. Now, the front door would be an obvious place because the windows have all been double glazed, draft proof, but the front door is an obvious place to lose heat. So it's good to see that they've actually got some proper draft proofing here. It looks like it's built into the frame actually. So quite a nice job, not a DIY job. But I really like the idea of a porch because it gives you an extra line of defence between you and the outside world. It's not a heated porch, but it does a very useful job in keeping out the worst of the weather. And of course, draft proofing is one of the most cost-effective improvements you can make because you'll get your money back on it very, very quickly indeed. One word of warning, you see a lot of these houses now being sealed up. They've had lovely double glazing, draft proofing everywhere, and you do have to take care of the moisture in the house because you also need a degree of ventilation. Otherwise you start getting a build-up of moisture inside the house and then you get mold problems. So you can see the changes in colour, and the blue bits being the coldest, then the green, and then the red being the warmest. So let's have a look at this floor, because this floor is solid. This probably, although it looks like quite a new floor, somebody's put one down. Is there any insulation under this or not? Let's have a look, see what we get here. And it's not over cold actually, so it may be that when they put these tiles down, they put them down on what they call a decoupling membrane, which has just given it that little bit of insulation. So it's all good. I do notice straight away, they got themselves a bit of a draft stopper here for the bottom of the door, which is great. Simple thing to do. These radiators are lovely, aren't they? Lovely big old cast iron radiators. They do require quite a high flow rate, and when I look down here, they've got microbore pipes going into them, which is all very well if you've got a high flow temperature, but if you were going to put a heat pump in this property, you'd have to repipe all those radiators. So that could be quite difficult. That would mean taking up floors, renewing all the pipework throughout. You can keep the radiators for sure, but you definitely need to upgrade that pipework. So that's a big expense. So you can have all the technology in the world, but you know, if you walk around just in your socks, you can very soon tell when you get temperature difference. Even 1 degree is detectable. Now, I can feel straight away between this floor and this floor, there is a big temperature difference. And I think that this must have underfloor heating of some sort in it. Now, if it's wet underfloor heating, I've put a lot of that in. I like that. I've got it in my own house. If it's the electric under tile heating, it isn't a great way to heat a room, because although it takes the chill off the tiles, if you're trying to heat a room with it, it's often missold as room heating, but it will cost you an absolute fortune. My neighbour had it done, and I tried to talk them out of it. I tried to get them to go the warm water route, but they didn't. They were persuaded by the salesman. They had the electric, they ran it for 1 season, and they saw the bill, and after that they never used it again. Now, cats are also a great indicator of where the warm spots are in the house. I bet you love this one, don't you, Puss? If you've got a warm spot, they will go to it and they will avoid the cold spot. So if you haven't got a thermal imaging camera, use a cat or a dog. Now, when we go over here, this suspended floor, and that's ventilated underneath, if you can, it's a great idea to put insulation between the floor joists underneath. You can't always do it because sometimes it means you've got to rip up all the floorboards to do it, but if there's a crawl space underneath, it's often possible to get under there, and although it's not a pleasant job, if you do that immediately, you'll feel the benefits from it and you'll feel that the floors are warmer. Although it's not the greatest heat loss in the house, we obviously look at the walls, the roof, the windows, then the floor. But the floor, because of the thermal comfort, because you're always miserable when you've got cold feet, and if you can just warm that up a little bit, actually you find that you don't really need to heat the house up quite as much, because you've got a better spread of temperature, you've got a better thermal comfort. So I really love these cast iron column radiators, and one of the good things about them is if you set them out like these ones, you can actually get some curtains behind there. These are very lightweight curtains, but if you had some heavy curtains and you drew them behind the radiator, that would improve matters no end. Even though they've got double glazing, having double glazing and heavy curtains is really the best of both worlds. So let's have a look in the main living room. And straight away I see they've got a wood burner, and I've got a wood burner. A little bit controversial. Some people don't like the fact that they produce fine particle ash. It's always a good idea to keep them as clean as possible, by the way, because you don't want all that ash floating around. They're a great thing, and one of the good things about them is that they don't suck up the air from within the room. They just use the combustion air, and obviously you get the heat coming off the wood burner itself. But when you have an open fire, which a lot of people love, you find that that is drawing all the air from the room. You get maybe 10 changes, complete air changes per hour if you've got an open fire, because it's just taking it out. So with an open fire and central heating, you probably find that the open fire is sucking more heat out than it's putting in. So either a wood burner or central heating, but if you're running an open fire, be aware of the fact that it is probably going to reduce your heat rather than add to it. It's a lovely thing to have, but there is a cost. So the wood burners, very, very popular now, and you can see they've got the baffle here, so all that air that would normally be going up the chimney isn't going up. But one word of warning, if you do have a wood burner, have the chimney lined, because although people don't do it, they just think, okay, we'll put the fluid through there into the brick. Within no time you'll find that the tar will start seeping through the brickwork, and you'll get stains on the chimney breast upstairs or somewhere else, and eventually you can have a chimney fire because of that soot and that tar build up in the chimney. So very, very important, if you have a wood burner, have a liner. And I see they've added a tubular steel column radiator here. They're not going to give you as much heat as when you've got the radiator the other way round and it's low down, because obviously the thing's convecting, so most of the heat is going to be up at the top. But it does in the end stratify, and very, very effective. And if you haven't got much space, then it's a really great idea. The fact that you've got all these different airways through here means that you do get a huge amount of heat out of these. And again, I see they've got microbore pipes feeding this radiator, which is all very well if you've got a boiler and you can run it at 60, 70 degrees Celsius. If you try running this on some low temperature system like a heat pump, it's going to be disappointing. So let's have a look at the bedrooms. Okay, double glazed obviously, like the rest. Now this is an old radiator. I've not seen one of these for a good few years. It's doing well. You can see they're very narrow waterways. Probably had a bit of rust in it, a bit of sediment building up. So it's probably not a great flow rate through that. And being on microbore pipes again, if they were trying to run their system at a low temperature, even if they had just a condensing boiler and they wanted to run it at a lower temperature for longer, then a radiator like this would struggle to heat this room. So I would definitely be looking to upgrade this radiator to a more modern one with better convector panels behind it, just because you get a better efficiency out of it. Now you may wonder, a lot of people ask, why would you put a radiator under a window? Because that's the coldest part of the room, and that is precisely why it was done. One thing, it's a place where you're not going to put furniture, but the other thing is that because you've got cold air dropping from the window and then you've got hot air coming up, you get a much more vigorous circulation, a much more vigorous convection of the hot air if you have it in the coldest part of the room. If this radiator was put over there in an internal wall where it's not very cold, then it would be convecting that way and you get the cold air, you get a clash. So although it's inconvenient in terms of curtains and other things, it is actually quite a sensible place to put a radiator. So they've got a lovely old fireplace in here, and I like these features. This is how all the rooms were heated at one time. But of course with fireplaces you do have a draft, or you should have a draft going up into a disused chimney, and that will be taking heat out of the room. And also when the wind blows you sometimes get a draft coming back, and I can feel straight away the cold air around this chimney, and that I would think is dropping down the chimney at the moment and coming into the room. So the draft would go the other way as well. When the wind blows it would be going up the chimney, but I can feel that cold air dropping in there. So I would say that that is a big heat leak. I like the idea of keeping it, but we must acknowledge that we are going to lose a certain amount of heat if we have the old chimneys and we've got the old fireplaces, as lovely as they are. So this is what estate agents used to call a master bedroom, but apparently you're not allowed to say that anymore. That term has been outlawed. It's no longer PC. And a lovely fireplace in here as well. While I'm on the subject of these fireplaces, this one's got a little baffle that they've put in, which is hinged back, which is very nice. You can also get an inflatable balloon that you put inside there and just blow up, and it has a little tag that hangs down just to tell you that a balloon's there so you don't light a fire with the chimney blocked. But in this case they had these baffles put in and they work well, and I can't feel much draft on this one, so that's interesting. Maybe this one is better sealed than the other one. And of course they've got the same radiators here. They're doing well, these radiators. They've lasted a long time. So here's the loft. Now, is this a loft conversion? Looking at the houses along the road, they all seem to have a front part which looks original up to the ridge, but on the back they've got an addition. So this would have been the original roof obviously, but they've put a couple of dormers in here. Now I don't know when these were done, but it may well be that they weren't that well insulated. There is a loft hatch there, so we might be able to see something just by looking up through there. We've got a good load of loft insulation in there, so that's not actually very helpful at all. You can't see very much, but it looks to me as if they've laid that over the existing, so nobody's put any insulation in there. I wouldn't imagine that there is very much in here at all. So this would be a major area where we would be losing heat. If you look at that window there, you can see that Velux window is a clear case of a cold spot all the way around. And actually the rest of it, this bit doesn't seem to be too bad. So maybe they did put Insulation in here, some cold spots up there. Although people put these downlighters in, very popular. I don't actually like them because they allow moisture from the house to go up through there and you get condensation in the loft. So let's have a look at this, because this is the original part of the house, and you can see that that would be the old lath and plaster ceiling there. So not much has been done to that, and again, absolutely freezing cold, heat leaking all over the place. That's a major source of heat loss. All the way down the side here we've got big cold spots, cold bridging down the side. That would definitely be an area that could be improved, probably with a little bit of internal insulation here, something like thermal plasterboard. But in order to do something sensible with this, we would need to open it up, get a loft hatch cut in there, and maybe get some fiberglass, something like that, into the ceiling. This would be a lot more involved to try and insulate this area. So again, it's a question of how much this room is used. If it's used in the winter, is it worth spending all that money to insulate it if you're not getting much use out of it? If it's just a guest room, then maybe just heat it when you need it. Now, another consequence of Britain having some of the most expensive electricity in the world is that even a simple thing like lighting can add to your fuel bill. So if you've got old-fashioned lights, incandescent bulb as they call it, or even now fluorescents, LEDs are well worth considering, because if you change your lights over to LED, you can run them all day long for the cost of what it used to cost to run a light for an hour. So if you look at the kitchen here, you see the downlighters. All these downlighters here don't add up to the cost of one of the old-fashioned bulbs. I grew up in a house where if we left the light on, it used to be a penny off our pocket money. My dad would have had a fit if he would have seen all these lights left on, but they really don't cost very much to run at all. So now it's time to look at a few numbers, and there are all kinds of different websites out there where you can get information, but the Energy Savings Trust is probably quite neutral. It's a not-for-profit organisation. They got no axe to grind, and they do give a few helpful hints, but they don't tell you very much about structural things. They mostly talk about stopping using a tumble dryer, taking fewer baths and things like that. When we start looking at the building, I've already said that I consider external wall insulation not to be an option. The exception to that might be the gable end, by the way, because there are no windows on there, so they could put a bit of external wall insulation on there. But would that be worth doing? It's debatable, quite honestly, because there are chimney breasts in that end wall anyway. So I'm eliminating external wall insulation. I'm eliminating internal wall insulation because it's a lovely house, it's got nice features, and I think it would ruin it to be putting internal wall insulation in. The double glazing has already been done. You could get under the floors maybe and insulate under the floors. That's a possibility, but you'd only end up doing half the house because the other half isn't accessible. Then we go upstairs, we look at the bedrooms, we look at changing the radiators. The boilers are modern condensing boilers, so we're not going to change that. I can't actually see an awful lot in this house that they can do that's going to save them money. Now, they're saying that the house is cold, and they're saying that the fuel bills are too high, and they are looking for help, but I can't see a huge number of places where they could save money, short of doing something where the payback period would be in excess of 30 years. Now, as far as a heat pump goes, I did inquire about the heat pump, and they had a heat geek contractor look at it, and he said, based on what he can see, it really isn't viable. He couldn't guarantee the temperatures, and he would say you'd need to change the electricity supply to a 3-phase supply, because the heat pump they'd want to put in would be 18 kilowatts, which is huge, and that would mean that you had to do all kinds of upgrades. So the heat pump isn't viable. We come back down to that gas boiler. For them, they're doing the best they can using a gas boiler, using the wood burning stove occasionally, saves a bit of money, and keeping the doors closed as much as possible. And short of that, and I think this will be the case for a lot of people, especially down this road that I've just walked down, where there's not a huge amount to be done. Sorry to be so pessimistic. I'd love to have come up with some wonderful answers for them, but I think we have to be realistic and say that that gas boiler is going to be part of their heating equation for a good many years to come. Now, whether that's natural gas or whether that's hydrogen, who knows what the future holds. Personally, say I don't see this initiative of the governments to scrap gas boilers and turn us all over to heat pumps. I don't see it ever working for a lot of homes in Britain. One of the things that I think may have put that heat pump contractor off is that microbore, because it's everywhere, and that means that every floor in the house has got to come up. While you take the floors up, you might as well insulate under the floors, so that would be a good thing to do. But it would be a huge undertaking to rip out all that microbore and put in larger pipes, maybe 28mm pipes in some places, but at least 22mm pipes to feed these radiators. That alone, I think, may be the reason why they ran away from the job. So let's just play devil's advocate for a minute and say that money isn't an issue. What they want to do here is to cut their carbon emission to save the planet. If you're going to do that, you could definitely do external wall insulation down the gable end. You could certainly take up all the floors and replace that microbore with larger pipes and insulate under the floors. You could certainly take down the ceilings in the loft, in that old bit where the lath and plaster is, and put some decent insulation in there, and that would help enormously. And you could probably line the walls on the inside in the loft, because I think that would also help. If we wanted to do all that, putting a heat pump in and those other measures, £60,000, maybe a bit more than that, and the payback period on that would be huge. But as I said, if your thing is saving carbon, reducing carbon, then yeah, if you've got the money, maybe worth doing. So the only thing I haven't really talked about is the boiler, and it took me a little while to find it, but here it is. Really, there's no scope for changing that to anything better. The only thing you could do is go for the boiler upgrade scheme, where you scrap this and you put in a heat pump. We've already discussed that. But for some people, it is an option to upgrade their boiler, take advantage of the grant. They will also give you a free boiler if you've got a particularly old boiler, like a back boiler, for example. If you're on benefits or something, income support, then you may find that you're eligible for that. But the best thing to do is go on the Energy Savings Trust website, have a look at that online form that you can fill out, and as you start ticking the boxes describing your situation and the kind of house you live in, you will finish up with an answer at the end which says yes, it looks like on the face of it you're eligible for some kind of grant, and then you can get in touch with the relevant people to put that in action. So there are options for people out there, but I'm afraid for a lot of householders it's a question of just having to pay out from their hard-earned savings. If you are eligible for a grant, you can go on the Energy Savings Trust website and you can fill in the box, and you get somebody around who will have a look and give you an energy performance certificate. There are professionals out there who can help you with this. I'm just a builder come heating engineer that's been in the trade for many years, and what I've said is just based on my experience. Don't forget, there are plenty of professionals out there that can help you.